And greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand. I am Steve Deace. He's Todd Erzin. He's Aaron McIntyre. And you are you. And we are brought to you by our good friends over at First Cup Coffee Company, the Patriot-owned coffee company with a flavor for every freedom-loving American. If you want to try it today or try it again, get 10% off if you go to firstcup.com and use the promo code DACE for 10% off at firstcup.com. Promo code DACE, and if you subscribe, you'll get an additional 10% off for the life of your subscription at firstcup.com, promo code DACE. All right, coming up on today's show, this came to me over the weekend with the school year winding down across America, and we are seeing more and more states adopt school choice. And I've always been of the mindset, I'm a massive advocate for homeschooling. We homeschooled our two daughters all the way through. We homeschooled our son through the 6th grade. And then he's been at Des Moines Christian ever since because of his interest in some other activities, football and some other things. We just had a hard time here locally satisfying those things with the homeschool environment here. But our kids have never once, except to go to like a ballet recital or a friend's event, have never set foot in a government school. But you know, given the realities of the costs, I mean, the first few years of Des Moines Christian, we were still living paycheck to paycheck, man. I mean, the show had not taken off yet. We'd not written any best-selling books yet. I mean, scrouching together that extra $1,200 a month for that tuition was not an easy task. It's just we thought Noah was worth it, so we found somehow the Lord helped us make it work. But now we're in a situation that this is becoming much more affordable. For example, in the state of Iowa, starting next year, if you make less than, I think it's $125,000 in your household, the $7,800 of the $12,000 that the state takes for educating your kid goes back to you, and you take it with you to any building you want. All right. Well, so now the what a $12,000 a year cost to go to Des Moines Christian for like a high school student now, you're taking that's a 60% off thereabouts. You're taking off of that.
And the year after that, there's no means test at all.
Correct. There's no means test at all. Of course, that hits the year after my son graduates from high school. That's okay.
Oh, trust me, I feel you, dog.
Yeah, it is what it is. You'll be able to still take advantage of it. Okay. Do we now, since this is more of an opportunity than it was previously, I've always been of the mind, I understand it's expensive. Different families do different things. Homeschooling is not easy. Okay. It has tremendous benefits, and we've seen that in our kids for sure. But it's not easy to do. And I can see why some families I just don't think that's going to work for us. I get that. Even though I think it is the ideal, but you can't always hit the ideal east of Eden. So, we've always taken the position on this show that we at least I have, since my name's on it, taken the position that I have things that I think are the ideal if they can be achieved, but given the difficulties of this era economically, the amount of two-parent incomes required, and the divorce culture and everything else we have, the amount of single moms right now, it's just not a feasible thing for everybody. But now we're in an environment where they're going to make it very feasible to exempt your kid from government schools in many states across the country. So with that being said, does the church then have a role, and maybe even should actively encourage, preach on this actively, like it would any other issue of moral consequence? Well, like it used to on every other issue of moral consequence. It doesn't do things like that anymore. But the ones that still do, is it time now to advocate, hey, it's time for the exodus, time to get out? What would that look like? What are some things that Christian schools, because this works both ways, it's a dual relationship, right? So are Christian schools, are they even prepared across the country for a mass influx of new students, and what would that look like? We're going to discuss that a good deal of time on the show today. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to discuss it with our good buddy Bob Vander Plaats, because he's uniquely qualified to talk about this, because he's before he got into politics, he was a high school administrator. He was a high school principal. Not to mention, he also had his son Lucas passed away a few years ago, but his oldest son, him and Darla's oldest son, was a special needs child. And so they've seen every angle of this. And then we're going to discuss this amongst ourselves coming up in the second hour of the show. And if the moment now is that, yeah, we got to raise the bar morally now. That the time and the excuse for, let me just drop my kids off at the government daycare to get indoctrinated and any day now, that, as Todd likes to say, that's the red bandana scene in Deer Hunter. Every day you drop your kid off at one of these government schools, you're just increasing the odds. Today's the day they come home and tell you, call me Shirley. Call me Shirley. That's actually my name now. Call me Shirley, right? That's basically where we're at, okay? So we're going to spend a good deal of time talking about this because it's only something the entire next generation may hinge upon, should we be fortunate in this country to even have a next generation. So we're going to get into this more as the show moves on. But before we get to all of that, let us first discuss what has been percolating within the mind of one Aaron McIntyre with his rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Congress Will Save Us.
Oh, you just voted to do it.
Y'all did it first, so you don't want to talk about it.
Voted to do it.
Order.
I'm trying to get clarification.
Look at, calm down. Calm down.
No, because this is what y'all do. So I'm trying to get
Miss
clarification.
Crockett, you're not recognized. Miss
I can't hear
Crockett.
you with your
And
yelling.
You don't want
calm
me to
down.
Be,
Can you please calm down?
Don't tell me to calm down.
Calm down.
Because y'all
Please
talk
calm
noise,
down.
and then you
You're
can't
out of
take
control.
Because if I
Look,
come,
Chairman,
if I
can
come
we
and
send
talk
out take a
about
break
her,
for 5
y'all
minutes?
gonna have a problem.
Mr.
Chairman.
All right, Chair,
I don't know why
okay.
you're
Order.
acting
Chair
like
now
that.
recognizes
Not cute.
Miss Green for 4 minutes and 21 seconds. 4 minutes. Let Miss Green talk, and then I'll recognize.
But I move to strike her words for a second time based on her second set of personal remarks attacking another member.
Who? Chairman Comer.
Because you all cannot
I have an
seem
amendment at
to
the desk,
apply
and this
the
sideshow
rules of the
needs to
committee.
stop.
We have to do this every time.
Hey, I'm recognized. I'm recognized. I'm going to go ahead and start talking.
Those are the voices of Congressmen and women Jasmine Crockett, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and James Comer late last week. Not to worry, though. Here's Congresswoman Nancy Mace meeting with House Speaker Mike Johnson in the former's office, saying on X, quote, "Thank you, Speaker Johnson. He's got more integrity than any speaker in recent history. The D.C. swamp could use more of it." Checking in on the occupant of the White House. Hey, what's your name? Are you black?
My name's Joe Biden, and I'm a lifetime member of the NAACP.
Okay, cool. Can you tell us more about when you were vice president?
And when I was vice president, things were kind of bad during the pandemic.
In other news, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has pardoned a former U.S. Army sergeant named Daniel Perry after a jury found him guilty of murder last year. Perry was driving his truck through a crowd of mostly peaceful protesters during George Floyd's Summer of Love back in 2020 when another man allegedly pointed a firearm at him. Perry then shot and killed the man. Perry is now free. And now the Pope. Pope Francis had a lengthy interview on CBS News' 60 Minutes over the weekend in which he talked about those dastardly conservative bishops.
There are conservative bishops in the United States that oppose your new efforts to revisit teachings and traditions. How do you address their criticism?
You used an adjective, conservative. That is, conservative is one who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude. Because one thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past, but quite another is to be closed up inside a dogmatic box.
Francis also talked about human nature.
What gives you hope?
Everything. You see tragedies, but you also see so many beautiful things. You see heroic mothers, heroic men, men who have hopes and dreams, women who look to the future. That gives me a lot of hope. People want to live, people forge ahead, and people are fundamentally good. We are all fundamentally good. Yes, there are some rogues and sinners, but the heart itself is good.
Learning Chinese today. Today's phrase is Jesus wept. Former CDC Director Robert Redfield says out of nowhere, we now need to be honest about the COVID jabs.
As you know, those of us that tried to suggest there may be significant side effects from vaccines we kind of like with the rest of your show that you had early on, we kind of got canceled because no one wanted to talk about the potential that there was a problem from the vaccines because they were afraid that that would cause people not to want to get vaccinated. The reality is, I was part of Warp Speed. These are important vaccines. We saved a lot of lives. They're important for the most vulnerable people, those over 60, 65 years of age. They really aren't that critical for those that are under 50 or younger. But those vaccines saved a lot of lives, but they're also, we have to be honest, some people got significant side effects from the vaccine. I have a number of people that are quite ill, and they never had COVID, but they are ill from the vaccine, and we just have to acknowledge that.
And finally, an oldie but a goodie when the PBS program named Finding Your Roots revealed to a Marxist academic named Angela Davis who her ancestors actually were. Davis, of course, subscribes to the notion that the U.S. was founded by colonizers and white supremacists.
Any idea what you're looking at? That is a list of the passengers on the Mayflower.
No, I can't believe this. No, my ancestors did not come here on the Mayflower.
Your ancestors came on the Mayflower.
No.
You are descended
No.
from one of the 101 people who sailed on the Mayflower.
Oof. That's a little bit too much to deal with right now.
Did you ever, in your wildest dreams, think that you may have descended from people who laid
Never.
the foundation for this country?
Never.
And that's what happened while we were away.
The laws of sowing and reaping remain undefeated. Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Miracle Made. Did you know that your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality if you wake up too hot or too cold? And this happens to you too often. I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. They're absolutely fantastic. Inspired by NASA, they use silver-infused fabrics that make temperature-regulating bedding, and it's so comfy at the same time. So you can sleep the perfect temperature all night long. We brought these guys on board last year, ended up having one of the hottest Julys in recent Iowa history shortly thereafter. It was the first time ever I didn't have to turn the ceiling fan on to augment the AC in the bedroom ever. And it's because of these sheets. Then we had one of the coldest Januaries in memory. They held up on the opposite end of the spectrum as well. I absolutely love these. And that's why I would recommend that you try them out as well. Go to trymiracle.com to do that. Trymiracle.com/Deace. That's trymiracle.com/Deace to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40% off. And if you use our promo Deace at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20% off as well. And Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Trymiracle.com/Deace. Promo code Deace. Trymiracle.com/Deace. All right, let's get to what's within Aaron's montage. And I'll just say this quickly. Anybody here remember Robert Redfield coming forth with any warning signs on the vaccines? Anybody remember this?
No.
Anybody remember? What do you mean, we Lone Ranger? Anybody? I mean, those early days, we knew the thin list of allies, did we not, Aragorn? And any time we could find any form of a mainstream quote unquote expert, we made sure to cite them and elevate them every single time all the way through this entire thing. I mean, we had an entire chapter in Fauci and Bargan titled Trust the Experts, but which ones? In which we pitted these experts from mainstream sources and entities and institutions against one another, right?
Gave them all a microphone when we could, yeah.
Anybody remember Robert Redfield being among those dissidents?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Let me think. Peter McCullough, Harvey Risch, Robert Redfield. I mean, that trio, we discussed them a lot, right?
Yes.
No, we didn't. Not one time. And dude is now making it look like he's Solzhenitsyn? Get the bleep out of here, you. Get the bleep out. Hell no. Nope. Acting like you're a victim. Bruh, you were the head of the CDC.
This is what pisses me off so much about this guy. Almost as much as Fauci. You know, you remember when he held up the mask in front of Congress saying,
said it would work better than the vaccine.
Better than the vaccine.
Yes.
You knew that he knew, and he knew that we knew that he was not being truthful. He didn't really actually think that, but he was just playing the game. He was just doing his job. And now all of a sudden, 4 years later, we have regrets suddenly. The dude is just a joke, just a total rudderless eunuch.
Oh, you want to be really mad?
Sure.
Most Americans agree with him.
Yep.
Fog of war, mistakes were made, let's all move on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's very clear. And that's why people like Redfield, there's a group of these people, and Redfield would be in the quietest kept category. And then there were people who were accomplices. That's most of your politicians and almost all of your media, with very limited exception. And then there were the actual offenders, the Burks, the Faucis, the people whose hands are on the weapon, whose fingerprints are on the weapon. What's happening, and Fauci has been one holdout here, maybe actually to his credit. He might be the only one actually still maintaining his own integrity, at least in terms of a consistency here. But what you're seeing is these people know that the West has completely lost its grip on right and wrong.
Yep.
And any form of retribution, righteous indignation is not forthcoming. They know this. And so what they're going to do now is gaslight you by expunging whatever's left of their conscience at your expense. And to the level that they want. Like he's still maintaining we saved a bunch of people. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You were like 300% more likely to require medical attention for the jab than be hospitalized for COVID. You were like 1,600% more likely to be to suffer an adverse event from the jab than die from COVID. No, you didn't. The actual epidemiological curve here is way in the red. It's not even close. It's a net negative. It's U.S.-sized deficits of negative efficacy, in fact. But what can happen is they can seep out just enough. You know, the guy who tells you I'll stop doing it, but doesn't really mean it. He's just sorry he got caught. And they're just doing this for themselves. They're a law unto themselves. Because they know there's no justice this side of heaven is coming. Thankfully, though, there is justice on the other side of eternity. And it is moments like this. Don't ask why a loving God permits a hell. Instead, rejoice that as desolate and awful as that place is, it does symbolize that God's justice gets the final word.
Just for a few scoundrels, though, Steve, just a few.
Yeah. Osama bin Laden, Hitler, and child molesters. Exactly, yes. I mentioned a few minutes ago, the West has lost its grip on right and wrong. And the ability to understand retribution, restitutional justice, righteous indignation. Let's talk about how this happened and why. Because that's in Aaron's montage as well. What you see in that clip from Pope Pelagius, I'm sorry, what's his name?
Francis.
Yeah, I got it confused. What you see in that clip there from Pope Pelagius is exactly what happened to the West. Now, we mentioned this last week. Set aside, the guy is overseeing a church that for going on a second millennia has attempted to make the case that tradition is as authoritative as Scripture, and he's insulting conservatives. Folks, do you know what a literal synonym for tradition is? Conservative. What's a literal tradition? The synonym for conservative, traditional. These words are synonyms. They basically mean the exact same thing. So I set aside what that means, that you're running a church that for going on a second millennia has tried to make the argument that what we have gleaned is good, true, and beautiful throughout history is as authoritative as revelation from God Almighty. And yet you're insulting those who agree with your own doctrine.
Well, just for a second. I agree with everything, but revelation from God Almighty, we believe, doesn't just come in printed form. That's an important. I don't think you were trying to misdirect, but
no, it's a distinction with a difference. So I appreciate that. So let's just set that aside. That's insane.
Yes.
Okay. But I mean, we had a clip last week of Joel Osteen saying, "I am redeemed. I'm redeemed." While never
you don't have to do that today. Don't.
No.
Don't.
Okay.
You've never not been fair about this, and you're trying to. Don't.
All right.
Don't.
Then we'll stay on this tactic. We'll stay on this road then. I mentioned the name Pelagius. We've done this show years ago. May need to do it again. Maybe right around the time we get to like Romans 9 and Romans 10. So 2029, 2030, when we eventually get there. All right. But there are three views of human nature that are symbolized in different individuals in the church. And other individuals have held these various views, but these three views are the dominant ones about human nature.
I'm really glad you're going to do this because it'll be really easy in this modern world to just get locked into the moment. Steve is about to give you there's a nothing new under the sun.
Correct. This argument, what the Pope is saying, these arguments have all been had before. Okay. So Pelagius was a heretic in the church. And what Pelagius taught is that human nature on its own is basically good. Now, why is that a heresy? Think for years when you guys have sent me emails and stuff and asked me if I could ask one question at a presidential debate, what would it be? What have I always said the question I would ask is?
It's
this question.
Either this specifically or a variation that fits
Is human nature
issue.
basically good? Why? Because this is the mustard seed of every left-wing, spirit of the age, progressive thought in our era. The entire mustard seed. The mouth of the demonic river that the entire spirit of the age manifested in our age germinates from, emanates from, is that human nature is basically good. For if human nature is basically good, it means we either A, don't need a savior, or it is not by grace that we are saved, but we can earn our way. We do enough good deeds. We create enough of a utopia. We've generated enough diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Jesus says to those people, Lord, we did this in your name, and we did this in your name. Depart from me. I don't know you. Get out into the den of iniquity with you. That's a nice way of saying enjoy hell. That's what that means. Okay? What is den of iniquity? I mean, enjoy hell. That's what it means. Literally. That's what it means. Enjoy hell. Now, what is fascinating to me about this is not just Pope Pelagius speaking open heresy on 60 Minutes, but doing so in the same interview where he refuses to affirm homosexuality.
Yeah.
Why? Because he has literally taken, it's beyond heretical. It's the dumbest, most moronic possible theological position any human being could take on anything. On one hand, he is saying, you are basically good. And I mean, we can line up the scriptures. He even says you have a good heart. The heart is wicked and deceitful above all things. Out of the heart, the mouth speaks. No one is good but God. Why do you call me good? No one is good but God. None would choose him. Okay. I mean, the amount of Bible verses, it would look like Thomas Jefferson's Bible when he cut out the miracles. That's what it would look like. And that's the amount of verses we'd have to remove from the scriptures in order to avoid contradicting what Pope Pelagius says in that clip. And this is the most important thing that will be discussed or debated in the culture today is this clip. It just will be rarely discussed and debated in the culture today because many people on the right also agree with this. Populism also says human nature is basically good. And if a different class of people who work harder and aren't as out of touch, if they get control, things would be better. They tried this in a place called France, right? And what happened right after the vote populi, the next thing was what, gentlemen? Right after that, the reign of
terror.
Terror. Robespierre put just as many people in prison as the aristocracy did. Just a different group of people. Just different people. It was literally Animal Farm. They looked from man to pig and pig to man and back to pig again, and they couldn't tell which was which. Because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And to say only rich elites from the World Economic Forum have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Is that what the Bible says? Nope. To say only poor people who are white trash and low class and ghetto have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Is that what it says? Nope. What does it say? All. And the Greek word, gentlemen, for all is what?
All.
All. And since this is actually also straight out of the Old Testament, the Hebrew word for all is, what do you think? What do you think it is?
Also all.
Yeah. It's also all. Regardless of race, creed, color, social standing, social status, prosperity level, or lack thereof. Now, it's harder for the rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven than the poor one because of the reliance on his own strength and striving and accomplishments. But there's plenty of poor people rotting in hell as we speak. And at the same time, he rejects this. He then wants to say, though, well, homosexuality is bad. It goes against the laws of the church and nature. What?
It seems like a box. It seems like a dogmatic box to me.
So if we're basically good, why, by what standard is homosexuality wrong? I mean, if provided, especially if it is a consensual relationship with people who are mature, who have committed no other crimes that we know of, have not done anything wrong, or otherwise contributing members of society on every other level, they just happen to want to sodomize one another. Why would we possibly say no to this if human nature is basically good? This is the most impossible decision to defend. So we're going to maintain the church's moral teaching while abandoning its entire theological premise. Make it make sense. It makes no sense, actually. It makes absolutely none.
Correct.
And so you're left with a few possibilities. He's just reflective of the region of the world he comes from. And it's just a collection of those instincts. As we mentioned last week when talking about immigration, he's worked over on one end by liberation theology, really isn't a student of orthodoxy, and is just a goulash. He's a chimeric like the COVID vaccine, okay, and the COVID virus. He's just a collection he's a concoction of things, or he's a stepping stone that the enemy put there to basically, hey, we'll come back to the enemy's like, we'll come back to the outcome of believing this later. Because if we roll it all out, like that Babylon Bee video from over the weekend, where Satan is telling the Democrats to tone it down, did you guys watch this?
Yes.
If the Pope comes out and says in the same interview, literally inject your penis into any orifice you want, and human nature is basically good, now there's going to be a revolt, right? Whatever's left of orthodoxy in the church, if you put both those things together, instantaneous blowback, right? But if I take one of them away and maintain one, well, does he mean that? The confusion stays and remains. But it's one of the two. It could even be both. He could be an unwitting messenger. Harbinger is a better term maybe in this case. But essentially what the Pope did in that interview is remove any reason that the Catholic Church should exist. Tradition is suicidal, and human nature is basically good. Then what are we even doing here? What's the point of your existence? There's no point to it. You're just bureaucracy. You're just collecting money. Just owning property. You're not doing anything. We got 30 seconds here. Todd, your thoughts?
That was all totally fair. This is all you have to do is, this is the Joe Biden papacy. There's so many similarities there, and your best argument against the Catholic Church is somebody now walking this mortal coil is to point at that two guys and say, what in the hell is the point? Why would I even push back?
We'll come back. Bob Vander Plaats will join us here next. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. Remember back when you could do all the normal things that you used to take for granted in a given day without feeling like you were made out of broken glass? You didn't have to decide whether or not it was worth it to do something because it was probably going to hurt too much after the fact. Living with pain is no joke. So we're not saying Relief Factor is 100%, not a panacea, but over the years, over 1 million people have tried Relief Factor and the 3-week quick start kit, and they've seen such great results in 3 weeks or less that they've stuck around with the product long term. So if you want to give it a shot, what is it? It's a supplement created by doctors who can prescribe drugs, so it's drug-free, but they wanted to create something drug-free that didn't come with the side effects of pain medications that can just mask the pain. They wanted to create something that would go after what's causing your pain, and that's inflammation in your joints if you've got chronic pain. And that's what Relief Factor aims to do. Again, it may not be what you're looking for, but there's a good chance that it is. Why not find out? Only costs $20 to see if you don't see a big difference in 3 weeks or less when you go to relieffactor.com. That's relieffactor.com. Also forgot to mention at the top of the show that I owe $20 to the poll jar for a couple of polling comments last week. So there you go. And if you're wondering what is with all the ones, my youngest daughter gets tips at her second job, and she wants us to put the money in her savings account for her new apartment. And so we just have all our ones and then just put the money in there. And so I know a lot of people look at you funny nowadays when you walk around with that many ones. So I just thought I'd better clarify that. Okay. You know what I'm saying? We'll just leave it there. All right.
Oh, what a lead in.
Indeed. Bob Vander Plaats, how are you, brother?
I'm blessed. But do tell me what the money, I mean, since I'm always all about the money, I looked at that right away and thought, what is he doing with all that cash sitting here?
We established this at the beginning of the year, just not to treat this election with any form of logic or reason and do any deep dives on polling or anything of that nature and just waste everybody's time.
So if you mention a poll, you have to...
It's like a swear jar, it's a poll jar.
Oh, my goodness.
Yep. So it's $10.
I better be careful.
Yeah, it's $10. Anytime outside, you can mention like... if there's like a primary and you're breaking down the actual results, it's okay.
Yeah.
All right, because then that's a game. All right. No, so box scores are okay. All right.
Okay.
But doing any form of forward, and I mean
analysis,
yes,
projection,
right? Like I mean, and you know what you're seeing, by the way, in the current polling would advocate for this approach we're taking. I mean, in the last 2 weeks, we are being told Republicans are going to lose every single meaningful Senate race. And Donald Trump is going to win Nevada by 13 points. You and I both know those things are both not going to happen at the same time. All right. One may happen, neither may happen, but they're both not going to happen. Donald Trump is not going to win Arizona by 5, and Hillary Clinton, Freudian slip, Carrie Lake is not going to lose by 14 points. You and I both know that's not going to happen. Okay.
So if you're the Timberwolves and the Denver Nuggets, you say, look at the box scores. We won in 7.
Correct. So...
all right.
Anytime the dog returns to its own vomit, and I'm the dog in this case, all right, I pay the stupid tax for taking these things seriously anymore. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
All right, so we're going to spend a good deal of time on the rest of the show talking about something I thought about over the weekend. And I think nothing less than maybe the next generation of the country might be at stake with this conversation if we are fortunate enough to get to a next generation in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what to do in states where now school choice has made getting your kids out of these government indoctrination centers easier than it ever has been before, and ours being one of them. And our family situation, because you and I have been good friends for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We homeschooled our 2 oldest kids all the way through. Don't regret that whatsoever. We homeschooled Noah through the 6th grade, and then because of his interest in extracurricular activities, he's been at Des Moines Christian ever since. The first few years he was there, Amy and I are still living paycheck to paycheck, and coming up with that extra $1,200 a month to send him there 10 months out of the year. We were almost down to taking bottles and cans back some months. Okay?
You better want it pretty bad.
And that's why, as much as I'm a staunch advocate of homeschooling, I understand financially it's not easy. Getting your kids out of government schools is not easy. Maybe you have a special needs kid and a private school cannot meet those needs. So I understand that it's not for everybody, but now I'm beginning to rethink my position, at least on some level. if we are making it easier than ever before, then why in the world is your kid still there? Okay. So like here in Iowa, if you make less than $125,000 a year next year, you'll get back about $7,800 of the $12,000 a month that the local school districts in Iowa collect from the
$12,000 a year.
Yeah, yes, yeah. That they would normally get for your kid being in a government school. $7,800 of that, it goes back to you. Okay, so now we're talking about what's that? Because that's about still what a tuition at Des Moines Christian costs. That's about a 65% discount. That's making it a lot more affordable. And then the following year, then there are no income limits on taking advantage of this program where you take your funding whatever building you want to go to. So with that being said, is it time now for the church to openly call for the exodus and say, get out, given what's going on there?
Well, I think if you're living out your Deuteronomy 6 calling of you're responsible to teach your kid when they wake up in the morning, when they're away during the day, and when you put them to bed at night, I think you have to have that conversation. I think you're exactly right. From the pulpit is a good place to have the conversation about who is teaching your children. What are they teaching your children? Steve, go back to the economics of it, though. It's not just $7,800 and say that Des Moines Christian costs $12,000 to go to. These Christian schools also have scholarship opportunities because of donors. And because of the $7,800 following each and every kid that now goes into these Christian schools, I tell people all the time, the Family Leader is one of the biggest donors out there to Christian schools today because of our advocacy and our leadership and partnership with Kim Rose in advancing the ESAs in the state of Iowa. But I think one is you have to vote with your feet. These are your kids. Don't leave them in these situations. And I was a public school teacher, Steve.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a second. Yeah.
So, but I'm saying, if you have the opportunity now to get yourself into Christian education where it is girded in a biblical worldview and biblical teaching, where Jesus is the way and not a way, and how that impacts every part of their life, that's got to be a real decision for you as a parent today. I still advocate you're the parent. You're the one who's got to be in charge and be responsible for it. But if it was my kid today, but of course, I already sent my kid to Des Moines Christian before we had ESAs.
So I told the audience earlier, I had forgotten you also taught. I remembered you were an administrator. You were a high school principal. You taught, you coached. So you've been in the government school system. How long ago was that?
So I became a teacher in 1985. And I was a teacher and a basketball coach for 7 years through 1992. And then as a high school principal for 4 years after that. So 11 years in public education. But let me give you the difference here, Steve. In public schools at that time, our big issue then for people like us, people of faith, was the human growth and development agenda. Okay, and it was being pushed down from the State Board of Education. Now, I remember being in front of our school board, and I said to our school board, "Is
that sex ed, basically?"
Yeah, it's basically about safe sex at that time. I said our school,
and much of that curriculum across the country was written like by Planned Parenthood, if I recall, right?
Without question. Yeah. And so I said to our school board, at the school board meeting, I said, "Listen, when we teach math, do you want us to teach the best math or the second best math?" When we teach...
Or teach unmath.
Yeah, or teach science or whatever it is. Do you want us to teach and they always said, we wanted to teach the best. I said, when it comes to sex education, do you want us to teach the best or the second or third best type approach to sex education? And right away they said, of course, we want to do the best. I said, well, that's abstinence-based. So then our school board at that time in the early 90s, so it'd be like 1993, Sheldon High School, I was there from 93 to 96, they embraced abstinence-based education as a public school at that time. Today, they don't have that option anymore. And so that's why I'm saying is that the public schools have changed dramatically.
That's what I wanted to discuss is it's not just the availability of options outside of the government schools, because I won't even use the term public schools anymore. These are government schools. Sure. They are using the same thing that we've seen take place with healthcare post Obamacare, where you're not a patient anymore. You're an individual that's matched up with a set of guidelines from government health agencies, and your doctor now most of the time just looks at the guidelines and say, well, it says you're 59 and you need a product. I mean, that's all you are now.
Sure.
Okay, you're a process. And that's the same thing true in the public school ideal. These are our schools. They belong to the communities. They reflect our values. Blah blah. No. These are government schools, and the curriculum they're doing is from on high. It's centralized in many cases, and I think it's not just the availability of the alternative, but what has become of the norm, right? So we're basically you taught a little less. You left a little less than a generation ago, 30 years ago. All right.
It's hard to believe, but yes.
And for people that don't know, when you talk about Sheldon, Iowa, that's the community that I went and spoke at a week and a half ago for a state legislator who isn't sure, frankly, you're pro-life enough sometimes. I mean, that's the community.
It's a very conservative community.
Yeah, this is Sheldon, Iowa, where it's not where another place it's like how many babies can we kill and still win. In Sheldon, Iowa, it's like how many of these abortionists can we lock up and get away with it. All right, so a completely different place, right? And so if you see these places, if you're seeing these changes in Sheldon, Iowa, that's like rural Alabama, rural Mississippi, right?
Yeah, okay? It is, without question.
That's kind of the demographic we're talking about here. So finish your point.
Well, there's a lot of people in public schools, especially rural public schools, who get caught up into the Friday night lights and my high school basketball team, and my wife works in the kitchen, or my husband drives bus for the school. There's a lot of people that the government school employs. But the thing is that for the public schools to get better and to remove all this garbage that had been inundated on them, you need competition. Matter of fact, when we passed school choice in Iowa, I had a public school board member in a very small school district up in Northwest Iowa, much smaller than Sheldon and more conservative than Sheldon, said, I'm glad you did that, but now can you free this public school up from all this erroneous stuff that they're making us teach in our school? And we can tell our public or our community that we don't do that here. And so I've talked to Kim Reynolds. I was raised in the Christian school system. When K through college, all Christian school. Then I served in the public school system as a teacher, coach, and high school principal. But I told Kim Reynolds, you need to revamp how the State Board of Education is appointed. Because right now it's all the teachers union appointing that. And all that garbage coming down is from that State Board of Education. You need to revamp that State Board of Education as well. Because the one thing as parents, I'd say exercise your right, get your kids out of those public schools, get them into good Christian, solid teaching schools. But on the other hand, you take a look at all those kids still going into these public school system. You cannot let that up. You have to reform that system as well, get them back to teaching and learning, and get them out of the business trying to raise our children.
Let's look at this now then the other way. In your opinion, do you think Christian schools are prepared for this kind of an influx of students?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we take a look at the state of Iowa right now. I was in Kansas. They're looking at school choice. They said, what did it do in the state of Iowa? I said, right now there's waiting lists, whether it's Grandview Christian, Des Moines Christian, Ankeny Christian, there's waiting lists. They don't have the infrastructure right now. So they're not, for this onslaught of people that want to take advantage of the Christian school system, they're not prepared. That said, you have an inner city school like Joshua Christian Academy that's very prepared to take on the different kids. And I think even up in Northwest Iowa, because that option has been around for quite some time, like Western Christian stuff, they're prepared to take on these new kids. But right now, parents, you have options. I think that's what we're trying to tell you. We have given you options. Exercise those options according to Scripture and the best of your parental ability.
What about when it comes to like special ed? When you know what this is like, you had a son who was disabled, Lucas, who passed away a few years ago. What if you've got from your experience, are Christian schools prepared to take on that responsibility?
There's no doubt they have to ramp up that game. They're not there yet. That said, the public school system was heavily indoctrinated, say, with the area education agencies that we had right here in the state of Iowa. Mm-hmm. Kim Reynolds is trying to bust that up, meaning there are options, say, for a child like Lucas, to have community supports like through a child serve or other places that serve people with disabilities while you still educate the child in a Christian school environment. So there are opportunities and there's creative ways to make that happen. But right now we're so used to a systemized system that you have to break that up and you need to get your sea legs. But I think that's going to occur as well.
So then if there is a pastor listening to this show right now, we've got about a minute and a half. If there was a pastor listening to this show right now and he's like, should I make this a central call to action within my church if we have school choice available in my state?
Oh, without question.
You would say what?
Without question. You need to make this a central call to action. You need to say this is a huge responsibility. I mean, your best evangelism is to those children that you're bringing up that are given to you as a parent. And if now the state is giving you an opportunity to say you can access Christian education, you can access biblical worldview teaching, and you have the funds now to actually make that happen, of course you'd want to do that. I mean, that's an opportunity for you to make that happen. I think what happens to places like us at the Family Leader, not only do you ensure you have school choice for those parents, but how do you reform the public school system as well? You can't just say, we got school choice, let the public schools rot like crazy. Now let's get back to the public education system and get rid of all this garbage and get them back to teaching and learning.
What if your dad is Aaron McIntyre? And he is already certified with 100% biblical worldview. If that is the case, do you even require any schooling? I mean, just by carrying his DNA, doesn't this just via osmosis, is it not immediately imputed to you?
Well, not everybody's blessed to be like that of Aaron McIntyre. What I always said, is that I was educated in the Christian school system. I served in the public school system. My best lessons came from my homeschool, my mom and dad.
Mm-hmm. But in all seriousness, I mean, we've gone from, in the last 2 generations, the schools were complimentary of your values to neutral on them to now hostile to them.
Yeah, now it's just a huge threat to them right now.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some creative ways for even to use ESA dollars to meet your child's needs, but still infusing a biblical worldview. It's a great opportunity. And that's why you're seeing school choice such a hot topic across the country. They want to make it happen. Texas, of all places, just adopted school choice. The parents are requiring that they have this option.
You know, and we're out of time here, but something else to consider too. I mean, you guys churches building all these buildings all over the country. What are they doing on Tuesday afternoon at 1:30? What's going on there?
Our peer in Ohio, the Center for Christian Virtue, they are using the infrastructure of the church to basically say,
why couldn't you just have a homeschool co-op just sitting there in every one of these churches?
Without question.
Again, what's going on Wednesday at 11 in the morning? What's going on there? And you have 50,000 square feet. What's 48,000 square feet of it being used for? What are you doing with it?
And if you have $7,800 a kid, you do the math times 20 kids, $160,000.
Yeah.
Parents, you can be creative and utilize the infrastructure that already exists in your community and make sure your kids get the best education possible.
Great stuff, brother. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're going to come back, go more in depth on this amongst ourselves next. We're back with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace, he's Todd and he's Aaron McIntyre, and you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Email us, steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. Follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also, if you love the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and we would appreciate those. And we have appreciated every single one of those that you've sent us so far. And also make sure, if you're a podcast listener, you hit subscribe or follow if it's iTunes that you listen to us on, because that way every time we do a brand new episode, it will show up in your feed every single time. Well, there's a big debate happening right now. Maybe you don't see it if you're not on Twitter, but in Twitter Christian circles, there is a huge debate happening right now over Israel and whether we have an undying duty, no matter what, to stand with Israel unconditionally. As God says to Abraham in the Bible, I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. There's another viewpoint of Christianity throughout the centuries that says that covenant was fulfilled, and we are now in the church age, and we don't have that kind of an obligation. Here's the reality. Regardless of which of those camps you fall down into, Israel needs the gospel badly. We saw during COVID Benjamin Netanyahu imposed maybe the worst lockdown of any free country in the world on the people of Israel. And then we saw the first religiously observant Jew prime minister in Israeli history, in modern Israeli history. Naftali Bennett basically turned the nation over into a lab experiment for Pfizer. Before that, Israel was steep in secularism, even more pro-rainbow jihad than us, even more pro-abortion than us. Israel desperately needs the gospel, period. And there's an organization that we partner with here on the show that agrees. It's called Voice of Judah. They aim to inspire evangelism and discipleship and church planting in the land of Israel. They use humanitarian outreach to support Israelis, all Israelis, and to build those relationships, to serve those people. And the fields are ripe for harvest. Talked to a member of this organization a few weeks ago, and they were telling me how they're now getting more. Israel has one of the youngest median ages populations of any of the democratic small d countries in the world. And he was telling me we're getting more theological questions now than we ever have before. So the fields are ripe there, but the workers are few. One of those workers that has been sent out into those fields is Voices of Judah. If you want to rise up and support them at this critical moment in the history of the nation of Israel, and also on behalf of the gospel, you can visit their website, VOJ Israel for Voice of Judah. So J as in Judah, V as in victory, vogisrael.org/Steve to learn more about their inspiring work, vogisrael.org/Steve. Again, that's vogisrael.org/Steve. So they do both the humanitarian work, but also they are spreading the gospel message there as well. We are spreading a different gospel message here and have been in our schools for the last generation. I think if you were Gen Xers, Todd, that would be you and I. We were probably the last generation of Americans who their kids had Easter break, Christmas break.
Yeah.
Good Friday was a school holiday. Your kids sang Silent Night and Little Drummer Boy at the school Christmas program, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that stuff was all going on as I was going through Wyoming and Grand Rapids public schools, the latter part of my public education years in the late 80s, early 90s. And then what happened is shortly after that, they took all that stuff out. It became winter break, spring break, harvest festivals, and winter concerts. And we were sold that, well, this needs to be a neutral place.
Diversity is our strength.
Yes, as if there is any neutral space. There's not. Never forget every government. And when I say every government, man, I'm talking especially your local school board. I'm not just talking like the big federal monstrosities throughout human history. Every form of government, every government ever in the history of humanity has been a theocracy. We are only debating who or what is the theo,
yes,
and what they, she, it expect out of us. That's
Modern
it.
day small town school boards are some of the most religiously fascistic entities in all of mankind.
It is impossible to create something where you're just going to take young skulls full of mush, as Rush used to say, and teach them a technical trade. No, not happening. This is what Luther was concerned about at the advent of public schooling in Germany, that these things would usher children to the very gates of hell if they even attempted to form a neutral space. Because why? It's what Jesus says, when you cast a demon out and you don't put something righteous in its place, 7 more just like it will rise up to fill its spot. Someone's theo is getting worshipped here. It's just a matter of who that is. And so it was always just a temporary staging area to get our worldview out. They're going to be neutral places. Okay? So that once we were out, the new worldview, the new speak, the new religion would now come in. And that's where we are now. And I don't care where you are. I don't. Even if you've got 6 Shannon Joys on your school board. If anything, if that's and God bless you if you do, tell me where that is. Okay?
Seriously,
we want to celebrate you. Okay?
Packing the car now.
Yes, but understand, even if you do that, if anything, the odds will go higher. The enemy will send it. We'll find the one blue-haired, the technicolored-haired teacher.
Oh yeah,
cat lady, and she'll be even more belligerent about convincing your kids that they need to be called Shirley. Your sons need to be named. Your sons will now say, "Do call me Shirley." There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. It's open warfare upon you now, whether you desire it or not. That's where we are.
This is one of the main reasons, and you know this well, you had a front seat, but this is one of the main reasons Varnum versus Bream happened in Iowa. Iowa writ large, a state, they've purposely picked it because it wasn't California. They judge shopped. You'll remember the name.
Yep.
They purposely planned to do it right here to make it seem like this is the tide that's overcoming us all, no matter where we are.
They wanted a place that had a non-residency requirement, because Iowa's an agricultural state. A lot of kids grow up on agricultural areas, then move away, want to come home and get married on mom and dad's farm or grandpa and grandma's farm. So we don't have a residency requirement for marriage. So they were looking for that. And then a place that would kind of, as you just said, symbolize that. If Iowa can go rainbow jihad, then the whole country has, right? Again, the enemy was looking to defecate on the American Gothic painting. He was looking for it. He was looking to smash your stained glass windows. He's looking to do this. Okay, he is looking to desecrate. That's what he's looking to do. So there is nowhere, at least if you've got 6 Shannon Joys on your school board, you're ready for the fight, okay? But understand, you're not going to be exempted from it because you have 6 Shannon Joys on your school board. You're just ready for the fight, and they'll bring it to you. Just to let's see how ready you really are. Wrote a column earlier this year about middle of nowhere, Illinois. Middle of nowhere, Illinois.
It's on the border of Kentucky.
Yeah,
it's south.
Yes. I mean, it's basically a red state. And the local librarian is in a civil war because they sent a bunch of people in from California to make them put gay porn in the reading section for the kids. And she's like, I'm not going to do that. No, it's open warfare now. I don't care what government school system you're in. I don't care what government school your kid is in. Every day is Russian roulette. This might be the day they come home and say, I've got new pronouns just dropped. I've got a few questions about some things. Nevertheless, private schooling in this country has not been accessible for many people for many years. And it's only getting more expensive like everything else. Homeschooling, I adore it. I love it. I'm a huge advocate of it. But I'm not going to lie to you and sit here and say, our 3 kids got along great every single day. And I mean, and mom thought she was living a little house on the prairie. Amy thought it was Little House on the Prairie every day. I'm not going to lie to you and say that. There were definitely days I got home, do something. I can't do this anymore. It's not easy. Now, with school choice, we have made it easier than it ever used to be right now. And so I think given the stakes, throughout the course of my career, I've reevaluated my positions on things. I used to be a hardcore Reagan-era interventionist on foreign policy. After what I witnessed in Iraq, I reevaluated that. There's a couple of arguments my libertarian friends have won me over on. That's one of them. And then there's other arguments that they haven't won me over on, and I'm still vehemently in disagreement with them. But I'll check myself. I don't think I'm the oracle at Delphi here. So over the weekend, I got to thinking. And what really inspired it was another spate of libs of TikTok videos. And I'm looking at the calendar. I'm like, the school year is coming to an end. And we're seeing an increasing amount of states now adopt school choice, and those numbers are going to continue to grow, especially in red states. Maybe it's time for me to reevaluate my position on this. I have erred on the side of conscience and maximum grace where this is concerned. Because of the difficulties of accessing the alternatives. But if we're going to not make them as difficult as they used to be, maybe we need to, the standard needs to go up here of what we're now asking of our fellow countrymen here. Fair?
Oh, more than fair.
So even if that's not the case, I think we should at least examine it.
As I emailed you directly when you said we're doing this, I am very excited about this because this has a lot to do with the Harrison Butker conversation, in my estimation, and transforming much more than education. This is probably, if you want to transform as much of the culture with one frontier, and I use that word purposefully, because right now we talk modern Christian man desperately needs a frontier, something to conquer.
Yeah.
You want to terraform?
I love this.
This culture as much as possible. Steve has hit on the one thing that is most likely to do it if we're serious about it.
So the rest of this hour, I want us to wrestle with 3 questions. Okay, let's. Here's the first one. Should churches in states that now have school choice be actively urging their members who qualify to now get their kids out of government schools for the coming school year? Just as we would expect a church to advocate, hey, don't take your kids to drag queen storytime hour. Hey, don't kill your kids. Hey, don't abandon your kids, right? We would now understand that's not a baseline expectation a lot of churches are meeting today. But I don't know how many of those churches are tuned into this show in the first place. Fair? Okay. So, no one on the right would blush, or I can't even, over churches from the pulpit addressing any of the things I just said, right? No one would, right? On the right anyway, okay? On our side. Don't kill your kids, don't trans your kids, don't take them there. Okay.
Yes, that.
Okay, so then why not don't forsake your kids? Then you have an option. Is this something that now needs to be addressed pulpit level in our churches? Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Oh, I absolutely think so. It is spiritual malfeasance from anybody who claims to be a decent shepherd to do so. Now, you asked a double-headed question, both the church and the state. The state, I would say no. I think the state...
No, I mean churches in states.
Okay. Well,
yeah. Should churches in states...
We're not doing hypotheticals here.
Yeah.
We're talking about what's actually...
Did I read that incorrectly?
Yes. So let's put the question up there again. Should churches in states that now have school choice, so it's not a hypothetical, okay? Should churches in those states where school choice exists, our own, for example, okay, be actively urging their members who qualify to now get their kids out of the government schools for the coming school year? So it's not a theoretical, as Aaron pointed out. It's not a hypothetical. Yes. This is an off-ramp. Now, Petra is available now.
We're talking Montana, Arizona, Utah, Oklahoma, Iowa, Arkansas, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Alabama, North Carolina, and Florida.
And these are all, not coincidentally, states that have very higher than the average, in many of those cases, would be higher than average church attendance as well. Okay, so should this be a cause celeb within the churches of these states?
Well, and fundamentally, we need to have it because this will importantly, preach the gospel beyond the issue of education, because right away you're going to run into sacred cows about the reasons, the initial reasons why not, and there's going to be a lot of them. There's going to be the small town go team. There's going to be various comfort factors. I just think you start the Harrison Butker issue. To do this right, to do it honestly, because there's a reason Christian schools have become default elite prep schools.
By the way, let's mention too, we're going to tackle 3 questions, and one of them is going to be looking at the responsibility of Christian schools to be ready for what we're even talking about. So we are going to get to that. We understand this is not a one-sided conversation, but let me address that up front. But go ahead, Todd.
Well, but it's going to have it's not more of what already exists in terms of what you think of as a private school. This whole thing, if done right, is going to look entirely different. Especially at the elementary level and perhaps into the middle school level, it's going to look like a hybrid of what you think of as Christian school as homeschooling. I mean, so many of our paradigms would be exploded by this. This is why I love. No one will be allowed to be comfortable in this conversation. The gospel will try. You can't keep the lion in its cage if you really plan on having this conversation. That's why I love it so much.
So the answer is yes, but that's not the totality of the answer. I think what needs to be preached in tandem from the pulpit, from church leaders in these types of states, is you need to be just as involved with whatever you can be, whatever leverage you have with these Christian schools. If you choose to send your kids to private schools or Christian schools, you need to be just as involved as you already should be with your public schools. And if you're not, that's a problem. I think both need to be emphasized with the same amount of intensity, maybe even the latter part with even more intensity than where you send your kids to school. Because the reason why this is so tantalizing let's just face it, a lot of parents who are dismayed with their public schools is because too many parents like that are not already as involved as they should be.
You get it, Aaron.
So you're going to be uncomfortable one way or another along the lines of what Todd was saying. If you take control, true control, dominion, if you will, of your children's education, who is teaching them what they're being taught, where they're being taught, if you're going to be as involved in taking dominion over that, which you do have the right to do, as I believe God's authority has given to you as a parent, you're going to be made uncomfortable, whether that's keeping the kids cooped up in the house for 3-4 hours a day, teaching them at home, or making sure you're dogging respectfully, as you should be sometimes, maybe with a little bit more degree of confrontational nature, as you should be with your public schools or private schools. You're going to be uncomfortable one way or another. Just that needs to be preached.
We put this question to our Twitter following over the weekend, and here are the results of that. 94% said yes. Churches and states that now have school choice should be actively urging their members who qualify to now get their kids out of government schools for the coming school year. 6% said no. Now, one of the most common objections I saw in the replies to the yes crowd, I want to address this in a moment, okay? Right after I tell you about our friends over at Patriot Mobile for a decade now, they've been on the vanguard. They have been leading the fight to build America's parallel economy. And you don't have to, with a product we all pretty much need to have in modern America, you don't have to directly fund the companies that hate you anymore. Instead, make the switch to America's only American mobile phone provider called Patriot Mobile. They've got an outstanding U.S.-based customer service team. What does U.S.-based mean? It means that you can understand everything they say. Can't take that for granted when you make a customer service call nowadays. You can also have a customized experience. They'll make it as customizable and flexible for you and your family as they possibly could. And that means you can keep your current phone if you make the switch. You can upgrade your phone. You can keep your current number, or you can change your number. Whatever you want to do, they'll make it work for you. If you're a veteran or first responder, let them know when you go to make the switch. They've got extra ways to say thank you for your service. All of us, if you use my name, Steve, as your promo code, you'll get a free activation if you make the switch today at patriotmobile.com/Steve. That's patriotmobile.com/Steve, or call them at 972-PATRIOT. So one thing I've heard, and I've heard this before, I remember I heard this from someone years ago too, and my kids are there to be missionaries. And I heard this from someone at a church once, and I found out years later, and you know, when this kid was in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, he talked a lot about Jesus, but he left him there. Their parents left him there the entire time. He ended up kind of being a dropout, getting a girl pregnant out of high school. In other words, you know, the proverb is fulfilled once again that bad company corrupts good character. Okay, your children are to be protected. They're not pawns. I mean, everybody talks. A lot of what's been said to you about the Crusades is not correct. Okay? I mean, the Crusades did not begin with a bunch of Christians getting together and say, hey, let's go conquer people. No, what happened is the Muslims literally got 5 minutes from downtown Paris before the church finally said we should stop them from conquering us. And then realized, well, before they got to Paris, they've already taken Jerusalem, the Holy Land. Okay? We need to take that back. It was in response to Islamic conquest. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean, though, that this is like a highlight chapter for the church. Okay? I'm not saying that either. Just saying the truth is not usually as simple as everybody wants to articulate. And one of the saddest moments of the era of the Crusades is they did something called the Children's Crusade. That ended poorly. Kids are to be protected, nurtured. Your 5-year-old isn't a pawn, isn't a missionary. Your 9-year-old isn't a pawn in a culture war. I just wholeheartedly reject that.
And you're saying this is the most common objection
it's
you
one of the,
just
it's
saw
one of,
to
It's
this?
one of the most common ones for sure. Now, I am guessing you probably don't hear this a lot in Catholic circles, but we are called evangelicals after all, okay? And so the idea that my kid is there evangelizing. For every 6-year-old Billy Sunday, there's a 99% odds that instead what is happening is you're increasing the odds that your kid's going to fulfill bad company corrupts good character yet again.
Goodness.
No, I'm not. This is a frequent argument, actually. Aaron, have you heard this before?
Oh, yeah.
I understand over the years, but it's not like some kid next to you is just handing you a pamphlet. Your teacher's trying to trans you.
Correct.
What are we talking about?
Correct. I mean, I that's just the most passive thing ever. I've never been to a school board meeting. I've never been involved in what my kid does, but I send my kid to the lion's den to evangelize the Babylonians. I mean, that is just about as beta as it gets, but I've heard this many, many times. No. Protect the innocence. We need to protect the innocence of our children for as long as we possibly can. The first thing the enemy wants to rob from our children is their innocence. All your 6-year-old doesn't, is there some kids that may have a specific anointing that shows early? Sure. But notice we love to argue these exceptions. As I pointed to you out a couple weeks ago, you know who loves arguing exceptions and not the rule? The enemy does that. That's what the enemy does.
Can we move back to the inspiring parts about this conversation? Because I didn't see this one coming.
No, it's a thing. It is absolutely a thing. Okay?
Goodness.
Well, you know what? At 6, all your kid needs to know is Jesus loves me and mom and dad love each other and are going to try to stay together forever. And they don't need to know any more than that. The other kids there are not your responsibility. Your kid is. That is your responsibility. And I just wholeheartedly reject the idea that your children are pawns in a culture war. No, they're not. And they're not missionaries. No, they're not. They're kids. And they need to be protected. And they need a period of time to have an actual innocence. They have the rest of their adult lives to find out what the world is really like. They don't need to know at 7 what sodomy is. They don't need to know at 6 what chest binding is. They don't. So I wanted to deal with that up front. Anybody else want to comment on that?
No.
Did you know what? Let's go there. Really drive this point home. Did you all see the story last week? It kept showing out. I confess, there are some moments that just break me. I want things to go away. The story kept popping up in my newsfeed last week. An adorable 10-year-old boy in Indiana committed suicide because of the frequent and constant bullying that he was receiving at school. It's just... Here's the thing, though. His parents called the school not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 10 times, not 15 times. I think they said 20 times. 20 times to address the bullying. Now, it's a heinous tragedy. heinous that he was subjected to that bullying, but at some point, maybe after the third, fourth, fifth time, you say, no, I'm taking dominion over this. Obviously, we're not evenly yoked with the school. I'm sorry, but that's the same sentiment that you just articulated, Steve. We're somehow evenly yoked with the school, with the teachers that are trying to trans your 6-year-old. No, dispense with that. Take dominion.
The column you wrote about, Steve, from the district that I rescued my kids from.
Mm-hmm.
Every day I'm just harassed, and the people harassing me are from the kids within the Gay Straight Alliance, and they're untouchable. So this is my life.
Well, why don't you just keep your elementary school children and junior high children in there to get pestered, bullied? Because I mean, they're doing missionary work, Todd. That's what they're doing there. They're missionaries. They're 11, but they're missionaries at 11.
Expect big things from your kids. I did from mine, and they were missionaries to the extent that they could within. But once it was time to protect them, get out.
That's the trigger right there. Once it was time to protect them. Now, there's a different time to protect them at 15.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for one kid versus another,
Correct.
different gifts.
One of your kid may be different at 15 than the other kid may be at 15. Okay. But it's always the time to protect them at 6. It's always the time to protect them at 7. It's always the time to protect them at 10. Always. 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 Always the time. I mean, it was years until the kids truly understood what Dad did for a living. They knew he did a show, talked about stuff. They didn't know. Didn't let them listen. You know why? They were kids.
Yeah.
And they didn't need to know what Dad was involved in right now. There was going to be plenty of time for them to find out what Dad was talking about. Instead, what they needed to know at 7, 8, and 9, and 10, and 11 is Jesus loves you, and Mom and Dad love you, and Mom and Dad love each other. And they didn't need to know much more than that. That's all they needed to know. And I'm deeply opposed to the idea of robbing our children of their innocence when that is exactly what the enemy is trying to do to our children as well. So I wanted to address that because that's a frequent pushback that I get. All right, 2 more questions here to discuss on this topic. We'll do that next. We were talking at the top of the show about Robert Redfield acting like he's Robert Malone, Peter McCullough guys just got completely disbarred from the high level professional sectors, circles they used to run in prior to COVID. I mean, Peter McCullough went from a guy who established not 1, not 2, but 3 different medical journals, founded 3 of them, to basically, his name might as well be Todd Erzin, anti-vaxxer. Okay. And now here's Robert Redfield like, well, all of us that tried to speak out about this were shut down. Get the bleep out of here, dude. You were nowhere to be found. In fact, I specifically remember ghostwriting questions for Senator Cruz's office to ask you during the pandemic. You guys remember this?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Looking for opportunities that maybe you might show some leadership, and man, you punted on every single one. On every single one. And who pimped the mask harder than Redfield did? This mask will protect me even more than the vaccine, which turned out to be true, but not for the reasons Redfield was pimping.
Oh, I love these greatest hits.
Why do I bring this up? Because, guys, these are daily reminders. Now, while you have the chance, take some form of autonomy, dominion back when it comes to your health care. You can't take it all back. Can't operate on yourself. But take as much of it back as you can. Our friends at Jace Medical are a big step to that end. Get the Jace case right now to make sure you've got backups of award-winning antibiotics for the next so-called emergency, right when they're about to ban them and say you can't have them when you need them the most. You can also expand the Jace case to be customizable for the medications that you need, or especially if you've got an elderly loved one who's on Medicare, Medicaid, total ward of the state, totally at the mercy of the next gen, Francis Collins and Anthony Fauci's. Make sure they've got backups of what they need. Yes, EpiPens, ivermectin can be included as well. Go to JaceMedical.com, JASE. Use the code DACE at checkout for a discount. Code DACE at checkout for a discount at JaceMedical.com, JASE, JaceMedical.com, code DACE at checkout. All right, guys, let's get to question 2 of the conversation we're having about whether it's time to lean more in to, shall we say, encouraging parents to get their kids out of government schools in the states that offer the simpler route to alternatives than we had before. All right, question 2. If Paul were alive today and we asked him this question, how do you think St. Paul would answer? Aaron, this time I'll start with you. How would he answer the question, Apostle Paul? Should churches in states that now have school choice be actively urging their members who qualify to now get their kids out of the government schools for the coming school year? Why did I pick him, by the way? As I've said many times, when we get to these cultural questions, particularly living in a republic form of government, he's uniquely qualified. Not just as the apostle who wrote most of the New Testament, but he also was a Roman citizen living in a proto-version of a republic at the time. So he had certain access to, certain forms of civil rights. So he's uniquely qualified, I think, of all the New Testament figures, other than Christ himself, obviously. He is uniquely qualified to discuss the navigations of what it means to be a citizen of, have some form of freedom, but then also be in bondage to Christ at the same time. So Aaron, go ahead.
Well, I dropped this in passing in the last segment, but I think it would be 2 Corinthians, don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers. What partnership, what fellowship do believers have, or do the righteous have with workers of iniquity or with the lawless? And when it comes time when you realize that I am not equally yoked here to my school board, I've done all I possibly can. Maybe I've run for school board. I've showed up to every school board election. That's the vast minority of people that we're talking about here. But if you're in a place where you're like, the district that I'm in, you know what, maybe I'll keep pestering them. Maybe I'll keep going at it. But right now, this is a time for tactical retreat. I cannot be unevenly or unequally yoked with these people. I think that's some of how he would answer. At least I think that principle would be in play is probably what I should say. I think that's how he would answer. Now, there are places, this is a conversation for most of us living in cities where there actually are options. Where I grew up in Lamoni, Iowa, Decatur County, it's the poorest county in Iowa, still is. There are no private schools there. There aren't. Mm-hmm. There just aren't. So that may not be an option. Now, you could get creative. This would take, again, a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of diligence. Maybe you could start your own co-op, your own miniature private school with a number of like-minded parents, but you have to do the math then. What's going to be more beneficial? What's going to be the best return on investment? Starting up something completely independent of the school district, the public school district, or banding together with those like-minded parents and demanding and forcing change. I think that's another part of this conversation too.
And that gets back to what we talked about at the end of the last hour, which is, what is your church building doing at 2:00 on a Tuesday, right? What's it doing at 9 a.m. on Thursday? Yeah. What's it doing? And you're sitting there. Even if it's a small country church in Lamoni, Iowa, that's at least probably 3,000 square feet, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Or it's one of these, megapolises we're building in the suburbs, 50 to 100,000 square feet. Okay. What's all that space being used for at 11 a.m. on Tuesday afternoon in January? What's it being used for? Let's do something with that, right?
Yes. Well, to answer or to add on to what Aaron's talking about too, I have, now that my daughters are all, 3 of them are 16 or over, and you can see where their interests are, femininity, family, interests that they have in a possible career and all that stuff. I don't have one of them right now. It's particularly the two oldest ones who are in college that have any interest in becoming a teacher in the sense we think about it. But I'm certain both of them would be interested in a hybrid, a homeschool / teaching hybrid. And that would absolutely be necessary in rural areas, but also I think to get this thing off the ground and running sooner rather than later, we've got to stop thinking about that this is a brick and mortar, certain number of kids. It's certainly at the elementary school level for a day that goes from 7:30 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon. I know, you understand this, Steve, better than anybody because your family lived it. But I know many other homeschool families. Some days, the wheels come off, the kids. But in terms of efficiencies, your kid does not learn what needs to be learned. It doesn't take 8 hours every day.
No, it takes a few hours. That's one of the difficulties. Actually, is still providing all the structure of the rest of the day. 'Cause it only takes a few hours a day.
We can do this at the elementary school level with a bunch of moms who don't have to go and get their teacher's licenses, which, by the way, then all of a sudden the costs just plummet. You don't have to have the brick and mortar because you already have the churches. We just this is why our paradigms just need to be exploded on multiple levels.
Well, because we're the first culture ever founded within and inspired by the Christian faith, and we're still coasting off those, the exhaust of those fumes, and it's hard to still look at all of the buildings that still bear the markings of this and see yourself as a dissident. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
I mean, but it is going to require that kind of a paradigm shift. Yes.
Per St. Paul, though, what he would say, he writes situationally. I mean, there's a reason why if you're reading Galatians or Romans or Colossians, it's not just the exact same book. It's applying what's
happening in that culture, for example, at that time.
So what he might say about this, he might have a very broad, generic answer. In this one, I believe his answer would be what I'm certain we will probably get to on this next Theology Thursday after we wrap up whatever bows from our past conversation. But I believe in this moment right now, he would go directly to Romans 1. You don't need to make some broad, ethereal, we're worshiping trees right now, guys. Get them the hell out of there. I think that's what he would say right now.
Okay. All right, before we get to the third and final question, let's talk about our friends over at Hillsdale, because they are trying and have been for many years now, put a dent in to what has become of American education with one of the most decorated colleges in the country. And you can get a little taste of that at your house with a free, no-obligation subscription to Imprimis. It goes out to about 6.5 million homes all over the country. It's basically the Journal of Liberty. It's essentially what it is, the Journal of American Liberty. It's a defense of our way of life, and it also keeps you informed. It's because forewarned is forearmed, and it features some of the best commentary out there from the likes of Victor Davis Hanson, whom we've just had on the show recently, Christopher Rufo, who's been on several times, and more. If you want to get that free no obligation, you want to get that free no obligation subscription, go to daceforhillsdale.com for the preposition FOR. Daceforhillsdale.com is where you want to go. That's daceforhillsdale.com. All right, the third and final question here, because this isn't just a one-sided arrangement, okay? There's another aspect to this, and Aaron, you even touched on it a minute ago, coming from a community that didn't even have one of these schools, because if you're in a poor county, the idea that you're going to be able to attract the kind of people that could afford to do this just isn't there, right? Okay? Now, with it being as inexpensive as it ever has been before, maybe you do build one of these schools in Lamoni, Iowa, and places like that, but what improvements do Christian schools in these school choice states now need to make to be worthy/capable to receive such a large influx of new students? Is it worldview? Is it special ed? Because I've heard from a lot of you that are like, man, I want to get my kid out of here, but they're special needs. And the Christian school doesn't offer that, okay? Is it the quality of the teachers and quality of coaches? That does matter. You've got a kid who's a great athlete, like a Totters, and for example, that does matter. Okay, so is it busing? Because now on top of you guys are already working, I've got to make an extra trip now to take the kid over across town, okay, where it's just, because we obviously want to eliminate objections here, right? All right, And we're running out. So many Americans feel like they're getting run ragged as it is already. Now I've got to drive 20 miles across, both ways to work and everything. What is it that you think? And maybe it's a combination of all of those things. But what's the current readiness rate? Do you guys think for Christian schools in a lot of these places? So the churches are like, hey, get out, lead the Exodus. All right, the Exodus has been led. Okay. But is that community of ships out, sitting out there in the English Channel outside of Dunkirk, ready to pick up the people, take them, save them back home? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Is the infrastructure there? Thoughts?
Well, I already said you just have to do a cost analysis and a radical one. I think I already addressed that with at elementary school. It doesn't mean I think current elementary school teachers don't do a fantastic job, but the number one cost in educating kids is the people you're paying. You might have some team leaders, but I think there's tons of efficiencies there. But then also, there's a model within this for the Catholic Church, and the various parishes already, no matter who you are, part of that tithing goes to the school. But I heard many Catholic elderly men, I already paid for my kids to go through, kind of thing. And that happens within a model that exists within a Catholic Church, and they're already giving. You guys would have to educate me. There's now only one Des Moines Christian high school, a Christian high school that feeds the greater Des Moines area, it's not enough.
Yeah, you have Grandview Park Baptist that's on the whole other side of town.
That's right, on the other side. Yes, on the other side of town. But what do all the churches that the churches that feed into it informally feed into that, unlike the Catholic Church? So begs the question, how do you get all of them on the same page about educating children who aren't theirs, and the degree to which that this is? Now, do you want to talk about mission fields? Yep. That's way more of a mission field than telling your 5-year-old to go do whatever to the blue-haired teacher. So you guys would have to tell me how big of an uphill fight that is to more formalize it amongst multiple denominations. I don't know the answer to that.
See, I think that this is something that we're not, what you just brought up is something we're not discussing enough, which is why I wanted to ask this question, Aaron. Because, Todd, you and I's kids go to the same school, and it's one of the most impressive campuses that any K-12 school in the state of Iowa has. Okay. And they're expanding. They just got a huge land gift. We heard about this a month ago. They're going to try to build more because the waiting list, and Bob mentioned this last hour, the waiting list for these schools in our community is already long. Okay. And I am not entirely sure that even our best Christian schools, Aaron, are prepared to take this mass influx of exodus of Christian children that are going to leave the government schools over this.
They're not. I don't think so. I mean, there's a gal in our small group who teaches at one of the Christian schools here, and the tendency, and I think this is maybe true across all generations, but as you grow and grow and grow, the tendency is to water down. That's just, I think, it's inescapable. It's just, that's another problem. We've got a problem student over here. Christian private schools already had this problem to begin with, which is a lot of wealthy parents with problematic kids that weren't parented well by those wealthy parents, because sometimes they're wealthy and that's the problem, and they're spoiled. They're sent out of the public schools to the private schools. Now fix them. I'm paying you this money to fix them. That's a problem. Except the wealthy parents, they donate a lot to the schools too. And so if you hold those students accountable any given way, that's a problem to those parents. So that's already a dynamic that's existed long before school choice. I think what needs to be, again, this is a two-way street here. Parents need to hold private schools accountable, and private schools need to make sure that they are holding themselves accountable as well. Uphold standards, things of that nature. So I'm talking about in populous areas. That's already a problem. So standards, discipline, and accountability. That's a big problem and has been, and it predated school choice. In terms of like rural areas where there's not already a lot of options, attracting teachers is going to be probably the big obstacle, or at least one of the first big obstacles. And
teachers you want to teach your kids.
Teachers you want to teach your
kids. Not the kids who just do government school with Bible verses.
Correct.
But yes. Yeah.
But on the flip side, I'm not sure how it is in Iowa. Does the per pupil spending, is that the same in a middle of nowhere as it is in Urbandale? If that's true, you know what? You can live for a lot cheaper in a rural area where the property taxes and property values aren't as high. So that's kind of a double-edged sword there. But that's a big.
This is where the Butker thing comes in. There's a name for the people who would be great at K-5 education. They're called moms.
Yeah.
See, I think this is why I wanted to just make this an open-ended and see what happens. As we come to the end of this, are we coming to the conclusion that maybe the best option here is that our churches that just need to radically embrace being co-ops of some kind?
Yeah. A school, homeschool hybrid, which I think co-op is as good a piece of language as I can find to flesh that out. Yeah.
We're going to stick around and do overtime for Blaze TV subscribers. For the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow. Till then, Romans 8:28.